Cassie, darling, sit down for a moment. Joel asked his wife. You've been running around like a bee over flowers since this morning. I think you're too worried. Joel Hillman put his arm around his beloved wife's shoulders. The 36-year-old businessman was crazy about her beauty and intelligence, but sometimes thought she should rest more. Joel, I can't sit down, the young woman retorted with a laugh. Everything must be perfect for our guests. After all, they have come to congratulate us on our anniversary. We can't disappoint them. The husband buried his face in Cassie's marvellous wheat-coloured silky hair. You're so meticulous, sweetheart. It's a good thing you're just as meticulous about your work too. At least all the people who live and work in buildings designed by you certainly don't have to worry about their safety. Don't tease me. Cassie touched the tip of Joel's nose with a smile. Come on, we should be serving dessert soon. I want to stop by the kitchen to check on the cook. The lovebirds emerged from under the wide awning on the veranda and went off in different directions. Joel went back to the guests, and Cassie to a small annex where they were preparing a cake and ice cream for their party. It was already the 3rd anniversary of their wedding, and although some of the couple's friends thought it was too early to organise such a lavish celebration, Cassie had a different opinion. For her, every day spent with Joel was a part of a huge happy life, where she felt loved and needed in her small but wonderful family. Cassie checked the work of a specially hired pastry chef from the restaurant, and satisfied with the result, went back to the wide and long table, set in the middle of their large and bright yard. The smartly dressed guests drank and ate, occasionally making loud toasts to the health of the young couple. Cassie's best friend Amanda, whom she had known since childhood, stood bored, not far from the table, sipping a sweet cocktail through a straw. Why are you standing here alone? Cassie, who had come close to her, asked. The girl flinched and almost spilled the drink. Immersed in her thoughts, she did not immediately notice her friend. Cassie, you scared me, she said. I'm sorry. Cassie touched her shoulder. I noticed you weren't with the other guests, so I thought, what if something happened? Amanda only shrugged. No, nothing happened, she said, stirring the rest of the ice and cocktail in her glass with her straw. Except half an hour ago, Paul called and announced with fanfare that he was dumping me. What? Marvelled Cassie. Amanda, are you sure you got it right? You've been dating for a year. Why would he dump you like this over the phone? That's so low. Amanda looked at Cassie, tears glistening in her eyes. I don't know, Cassie. It seems that not everyone can have such an ideal marriage like you and Joel. She sobbed. What a shame. You know, he couldn't even explain why we're splitting up. Cassie, I feel so bad right now. Amanda couldn't take it anymore and laid her head on her friend's shoulder, crying bitterly. Well, hush, hush. Cassie soothed her, stroking her back. Do you want me to call this scoundrel right now and tell him everything for you? Amanda broke away from her friend and, wiping tears from her face, looked gratefully into Cassie's eyes. Thank you, my dear, but no need. Let's not give this bastard such pleasure. Amanda tried to blot her eyelashes with a napkin, but realised it was useless. You see, I've already lost the last of my self-respect because of him. I'm standing here, crying like a fool, but I really believed he'd marry me, you know? I thought we'd have everything like you and Joel, that we would love each other, understand each other, that he would carry me in his arms. Amanda cried again, unable to withstand the feelings that came over her. Cassie, with great difficulty, was able to calm her friend, and then escorted her to the bathroom so she could fix her makeup. If you like, I can call you a cab, Amanda told her from behind the door. After all, you don't have to sit here all night and act happy when you're feeling so down. There was a slight rustling in the bathroom, and in a minute her best friend reappeared in front of her. Only her slightly reddened eyes spoke of the fact that she had been crying recently, but unless you looked closely, it was almost impossible to notice from the outside. Don't worry, I'm fine, Amanda said, with a dazzling smile. "We'd better go dancing. You're going to have a dance, aren't you?" Cassie was a little embarrassed. She wasn't prepared for her friend's mood to change so drastically. "Well, yes, of course," she replied. At that moment, Joel suddenly appeared nearby. "Cassie, where are you? We've already lost you." Noticing that she was talking to Amanda, and seeing her look instantly turn from cheerful to sad, her husband asked what had happened. "Nothing much, dear," Cassie answered him with a sad smile. "Just a woman's talk. We girls always have something to talk about." "Paul left me," suddenly blurted out an upset Amanda, and again pressed her hands to her face. Cassie looked at her friend in amazement, not understanding why she was telling her husband this. "Oh," said Joel, embarrassed. "Well, that's terrible news. You've been going out for a long time, almost a year, I think."
"More," Amanda sobbed. "I still can't understand why he did that to me. Why?"
Cassie stared at Amanda with bewildered eyes, but she didn't seem to notice.
"If you and Cassie only knew how dear you are to me," Amanda continued, almost crying. "You are my very best friends. Cassie is so comforting and supportive. After all, I never hid from her that I always dreamed of a husband like you."
Joel shifted his perplexed gaze from Amanda to Cassie.
"And I thought I had found such a one in Paul," continued Amanda. "But as it turned out, I was wrong. He's just a scoundrel like most men. Forgive me for spilling it all out to you like this, but I have no one else to talk to. My parents are so far away. I'm all alone here. I have no one but you and Cassie."
Without asking permission, Amanda fell into Joel's arms and burst into even louder tears. Joel, however, resolutely understood nothing, but was very embarrassed. He furtively glanced at his wife, not knowing how to behave, but she only nodded, indicating that everything was normal. Then Joel carefully pulled Amanda away from him and said, "Amanda, please don't get so upset. You will definitely meet a man worthy of you. Cassie and I didn't meet right away either. Before that, we each had our own lives with unsuccessful romances. This, alas, happens to almost everyone. It's impossible to avoid failure altogether, including in love." Amanda looked Joel straight in the eyes, so attentively that it seemed to him that she was scanning him, trying to reach the farthest corners of his soul. It lasted only a few seconds before it was abruptly interrupted by his wife's loud voice. "Amanda just had too much to drink tonight and got very upset," said Cassie meaningfully, and looked at her spouse, so he had no doubts. She was jealous of him, jealous of her best friend. Cassie tried to chase away these thoughts, but couldn't help but admit that the worm of jealousy still moved in her soul when she saw how Amanda purposefully threw herself at her husband. However, she tried to explain everything logically. Amanda must have been affected by the cocktail, coupled with the stress she had been under. The rest of the evening went fine, and Cassie almost forgot about her friend's strange behaviour, although some residue in her soul remained. "Honey, are you all right?" Joel cautiously asked in the evening, once all the guests had left and he and his wife were alone. "Why do you ask?" Cassie responded. "It seemed to me that you were very upset," Joel replied, removing his expensive watch. "I thought it had something to do with Amanda's behaviour." Cassie smiled, true, a little sadly, and touched her lover's face. "Don't worry, Joel, I guess I did overreact emotionally, but Amanda had never behaved like that before, which is why I was confused." Joel looked at his wife, and a sly light lit up in his eyes. "Do you know that when you're jealous, you look just peachy, like a tigress ready to claw her rival's eyes out?" Cassie laughed and playfully poked her husband in the shoulder. "Stop it. I wasn't jealous of you. Cassie tried to sound as confident as possible. Anyway, I certainly can't be jealous of you with Amanda. She's my best friend. She would never betray me. But as she uttered the last words, Cassie felt a tiny prick of doubt. She had seen what Amanda had done. Could she trust her completely after that? The rest of the night, Cassie spent in anxiety and doubts, unable to sleep. Should she be worried? Or was the whole situation worthless? Also, memories from the past came to her. Shaky and fragile, like a haze, they brought Cassie back to the days when she had just met Joel. Cassie was born into a well-to-do family. Her parents were engaged in advertising. She grew up without needing anything. Growing up in love and care, Cassie was always characterized by diligence and a love for intellectual and physical labor. Together with her mother, she could spend days in their garden. Also, Cassie was always distinguished by excellent knowledge of mathematics and drawing, abilities that revealed themselves at a very early age. After graduating from school with honours, Cassie realised her long-time dream and entered the architectural school. Cassie spent the next few years digging deeply into her studies, and for good reason. In her final year, she was invited to be an assistant to the chief architect of a well-respected architectural office in the city. It seemed to Cassie that her most important dream had finally come true. Throughout her life, Cassie was always accompanied by Amanda. Her best friend followed her like a shadow. Although Amanda studied at the same college as Cassie, she didn't excel as much. Cassie often told Amanda that she simply lacked the ability to concentrate fully on her chosen profession. In response, Amanda only grinned. "Believe me, Cassie, I have a lot of concentration when necessary. It's just that I never wanted to spend several years at the college. I have other plans for my life, you know. If it weren't for my parents, who believe that you can't get anywhere without an education, I would have given up this nonsense with design in the first year." This confession embarrassed Cassie a little. She had pursued her dream all her life on her own, despite her family's wealth. Cassie hadn't used a penny from her savings account for her education. She had achieved everything through her own intelligence and hard work. It was incomprehensible to her why Amanda, who grew up in a family of ordinary military officer and nurse, was uninterested in studying and didn't want to achieve any professional success. "What do you dream of, then?" Cassie asked her friend when they were sitting in a cafe during their third year at the college. Amanda looked at her with undisguised triumph. "I want my husband to fulfill my every wish." Cassie skeptically raised her eyebrows. "Husband? But you're not even dating anyone," she said in surprise. Amanda's lips curled into a satisfied smile. She leaned closer to Cassie and said softly, "What am I talking about? To find such a husband you have to try hard, Cassie. I don't want to work till old age like my parents did." Amanda wrinkled her nose contemptuously and made a gesture of extreme disagreement with her hands. "I need a man who will make me feel like a queen, you know? Someone who will be satisfied that I, young, beautiful and cheerful, choose him out of hundreds of others." Cassie didn't say anything to Amanda then. After all, it was Amanda's life, and she had no moral right to interfere. But to Cassie, such a perspective seemed extremely strange, so she never brought up the topic again with her friend. Of course, in the future, Cassie had to listen to many of Amanda's tearful hysterics after her rich suitors left her. Although Amanda blamed everything on the men, Cassie suspected it wasn't just their fault. Cassie herself never let her feelings override her reason, so she was alone for a long time. Short relationships never turned serious, and young men she dated were constantly dissatisfied with her passion for work. People often called her a careerist.
Cassie had come to terms with this until one day her life turned upside down. Cassie had the honour of representing her company at the construction forum. There she met her future husband. Joel Hillman was a businessman who, in his 30s, already owned one of the largest construction firms in the country. He noticed the 3D model of the sports complex, designed by Cassie from afar, and immediately approached her stand. After studying the layout details, he looked at the young architect with admiration. "I understand correctly that you are the architect who created this sports complex?" Cassie was embarrassed but tried to maintain her professional demeanour, flattered by his sincere interest in her work. "Yes, this is my project. You're right. Do you like it?" Cassie asked timidly. Joel immersed himself in contemplation of the layout. "You know, I would invest in such a complex if I was 100% sure it would exclusively be used for sports events." "But it's not just a place for competitions," Cassie objected passionately. "It's a place where everyone can join sports and feel part of something bigger. Look." She turned the model to show a huge niche in the upper left part. "This is where 24 halls will be located. One hall, one section. This solves the problem of lack of space and offers various activities. Young children can practice here, and this part is for older kids and school-age children." Cassie explained her sports centre with such passion and knowledge that Joel was fascinated by this wonderful young woman, able to communicate her ideas so clearly and with such strong feeling to potential sponsors. "I think you're the most amazing woman I've ever met in my entire life," he blurted out in the end. Cassie looked at him perplexed. She blushed while talking, and her hair stuck out in different directions from constantly touching it during the presentation. "What?" was all she could say. Her radiant gaze brought the businessman back from heaven to earth. Joel immediately coughed, not knowing how to hide the resulting awkwardness. "I'm sorry, I meant that the depth of your ideas is mesmerizing. Here, take my business card and let me have yours. I would like to participate in the realization of this project. Our city sorely lacks truly modern places." It seemed to the girl that she blushed even more. However, she only silently handed him her business card and the booklet of their architectural bureau. Giving his card with his contacts, Joel hurried to another stand, but for the rest of the day he couldn't stop thinking about Cassie. The next morning, when the young architect sat in her office working on sketches, there was a sudden knock at the door. "It's open," the girl shouted, tearing her gaze away from the desk. To her amazement, a courier entered, carrying a huge basket of fresh flowers. The most remarkable thing was that there was no banal roses or lilies. The arrangement was made of rare wildflowers, framed by white and delicate coral peonies. "My God, from whom is this?" gasped the girl as the courier held out a form to her. "Alas, the sender wished to remain anonymous," shrugged the courier, "but a card was left in the bouquet for you. Maybe it will help clarify things a bit for you." The courier smiled, and after receiving Cassie's signed form, left her office, wishing her a good day. Cassie replied in kind, and once he disappeared, she rushed to get the card from the flowers. Shortly, she held a small purple card in the shape of a heart, inside which was written a brief message with a black fountain pen. "My soul, my heart, belongs now only to you." Cassie frowned, puzzled by what it could mean. There was no signature on the card, and she didn't recall making any new acquaintances recently. At that moment, her cell phone began to ring. She glanced at the display, but the number was unfamiliar. "Hello?" Cassie spoke into the receiver. "Who is it?" A few seconds of confused silence followed, and then a familiar male voice said, "Cassie, did you get the flowers?" The woman felt the blood rush sharply to her face. "Oh, it's you," she said in a trembling voice. "You recognized me?" It seemed to Cassie that she heard
similar worried notes in the man's voice. For the next 40 minutes, Joel and Cassie talked heart to heart, paying no attention to anything else. It was as if the world around them ceased to exist. So engrossed were they in each other's company. In the end, Joel dared to invite Cassie to the theatre, where a fashionable play with famous actors was scheduled. "I haven't been to the theatre in ages," Cassie rejoiced involuntarily. "I'll be glad to join you." "Really? Then I'll book tickets for us tonight, and if you allow me, I'll pick you up in the evening before the show." Cassie glanced at herself in her pocket mirror and saw her cheeks flush. She still couldn't believe she was going on a date, the first one in a couple of years. Inside, she felt a tiny sprout of future bright feelings slowly blossom in her heart. On the day of the meeting, Cassie wore her most beautiful dress. Normally, she wore business suits and jeans. After arranging her hair in a lovely high hairstyle, she took one last critical look at her image in the mirror. Satisfied that everything was perfect, Cassie went down the elevator and walked out of the doorway. Joel was already waiting for her on the street. That day, he let his chauffeur go early and sat behind the wheel himself. Just looking at the embarrassed Cassie, Joel almost lost the power of speech. He had never met such a beautiful, intelligent, and purposeful woman. Cassie had finally won his heart, and that evening Joel promised himself to do everything to make Cassie his lawful wife. The date was perfect. That day, the young architect felt a real, sincere affection growing between her and Joel. Their next meeting only strengthened Cassie's assumption. She realized she was truly important to Joel. The man turned out to be very caring and attentive. Soon, their relationship reached a new level, transforming into a beautiful romance. They dated for more than half a year before Joel made his beloved an offer. He ordered 2 tickets to Venice for the annual carnival. There, in the middle of a colourful crowd, dressed in amazing outfits and masks, Joel knelt before Cassie and handed her a tiny velvet box containing a charming gold ring with a large, pale pink diamond. "Joel!" gasped Cassie, pressing her hands to her face. She had never seen such beauty in her life. "Is it really what I think it is?" The look in her fiancé's light brown eyes said it all more eloquently than words. "Will you become my wife?" asked Joel timidly, as if he couldn't fully believe Cassie would agree. "Darling, of course, yes!" exclaimed Cassie, and threw herself into her lover's arms. Joel couldn't find the right words to express his joy. Instead, he gently took his bride's hand and slowly put a stunning ring on her thin, fragile finger. "You are my happiness, Cassie," he said quietly. "I swear you'll never regret agreeing to this. I love you so much." Cassie laughed loudly and merrily, wrapping her long arms around Joel's neck. "If you only knew the depth of my feelings for you," she said dreamily. "I know it's customary to say such things at the ceremony itself, but I'm not superstitious. So, Joel, I swear to you, nothing will ever separate us until my last breath." Cassie kissed her groom, putting all her love and devotion into the kiss. The couple celebrated their wedding outside the city, in a beautiful recreation complex. Guests sat on 24 benches, covered with flowers and colourful, inflatable balloons. In the centre of the glade, where the ceremony took place, a magical arch was set up, adorned with flowers and transparent ribbons. Cassie wore a magnificent wedding dress, specially made for her by a famous Italian couturier. She looked like a real movie star, so elegant and detailed was her appearance. Among the guests was Cassie's best friend Amanda, who was a bridesmaid. On the day of the celebration, Cassie was so absorbed in her own happiness that she didn't notice what her friend was up to. And she should have. Amanda was intently and greedily watching only one man, Joel. Cassie woke up sharply, convulsively squeezing her hands. She couldn't immediately realize what was happening. She had dreamed of Amanda's eyes, full of hatred and passion, but she still couldn't understand who her friend was looking at with such cruel feelings. Cassie looked at the clock on the bedside table. It was 7 in the morning. She turned to see her beloved husband's face. Joel was sleeping sweetly with a soft smile. He was obviously dreaming something pleasant. It was the day after their anniversary celebration. Cassie was full of anxious thoughts and worried about Amanda. Was she okay? At the same time, she slept poorly, haunted by memories. As soon as Cassie got out of bed, she tried to be quiet so as not to wake her husband. She immediately felt strong nausea and dizziness. She miraculously managed to run to the bathroom. Has it finally happened? Cassie thought aloud while brushing her teeth. Joel and I have waited so long. Cassie put her hand on her flat belly. She and Joel had been married for 3 years and hadn't had children yet. Maybe her prayers had been answered, and the Lord had sent them a long-awaited baby. But the test was negative. As she left the bathroom, she felt lightheaded again. The next day, Cassie tried to concentrate on work, but it was difficult. Constant nausea and a strong headache in the evening worsened it. After struggling through the workday, she went home. After suffering for a few more days, Cassie decided to see the doctor. The doctor, barely glancing at her blood test results, looked at her with concern. "Let's do an MRI, Cassie," the doctor said cautiously. "I want to make sure there hasn't been a mistake." "Is it that bad?" Cassie asked, turning pale. "I don't know yet. That's why I'm prescribing this procedure," the doctor said. "But don't worry prematurely, it might not be that bad." Cassie looked carefully at the doctor, making the referral on the computer. "So I'm not having a baby." The doctor looked at her sympathetically. "I'm afraid you're not pregnant. There's clearly something else and we need to find out as soon as possible." The MRI procedure was very difficult for Cassie. She felt like the machine would crush her in its deadly embrace. It was just a panic attack caused by constant headache and stress, but knowing this didn't make it any easier for Cassie. "Well, what is it, doctor?" she asked impatiently when all the scans and test transcripts reached her attending physician. The doctor couldn't tear himself away from studying the scans for a long time. Then he looked at the woman with sincere regret. "I'm afraid I have bad news." The doctor exhaled noisily. "The fact is that you have a tumour in your brain. I'm very sorry. The MRI shows that this tumour is in a non-surgical location. Treatment is possible, but its effectiveness, you understand. In any case, you need to go to the oncology department urgently, because without treatment, you have no more than 6 months." "What?" was all Cassie could say. She couldn't believe her ears. "What tumour? What are you talking about? I'm only 34, and I've never had any health problems before." The doctor peacefully threw up his hands. "Calm down, please. I understand that you are now driven by shock and refusal to accept this situation, but understand, this is how it is sometimes. People don't know until the last minute that they're sick. Diseases like this are very insidious." Cassie could feel herself starting to choke. This office was clearly short of air. "Thank you, doctor," she said, "for your honesty and for not feeling sorry for me. After all, I need cold reason far more than any pity or supposed sympathy." Leaving the hospital, Cassie got into her car. She sat motionless for several long minutes, then burst into bitter tears. She could not imagine that her life would be cut short so soon and so ridiculously.
all because of some tumour. Even through her tears, Cassie couldn't help but feel her head start to ache again, and the pain was getting worse by the minute. After swallowing 2 pills of a powerful painkiller, Cassie slowly pressed the gas pedal and went home. Her life seemed to be divided into before and after. She needed to gather her thoughts, to decide how to proceed under the current circumstances. Life had lost all colour for her. "What's it all for, if I can die, gone in a few months?" she asked herself. The woman was afraid of the moment where she would have to tell Joel about everything. She loved him too much to strike such a blow at the news of her possible death. Cassie also could not endure pity from her most important and closest person. Of course, Joel noticed the change in his wife's mood right away, and he could not understand the reasons for it. "Cassie, please, let's talk," Joel asked. "I can see that something happened. You've completely cooled off toward me. What's the reason? Did I do something wrong? How did I offend you?" Cassie looked at her husband, and her eyes shone with only sadness and sorrow. "It's not about you at all, darling." Cassie tried to evade the answer. "What is it about then?" Joel asked, perplexed. "Joel, I can't say. I need to think over first." She finally gave up and locked herself in her room. Joel could not get a clear answer to his questions, leading him to have more frequent doubts about her fidelity. Does she have a lover on the side, and I know nothing about it? What if she cheated on me and now repents, but can't admit it because she's ashamed? All these thoughts began to revolve in his mind, generating many suspicions. After a week of such worry and reflection, Joel decided to turn to Amanda, hoping to find out about Cassie's condition. Having agreed to meet his wife's friend in a cafe, he immediately counted the minutes on his wristwatch waiting for her. To his surprise, Amanda showed up, looking as if she were going on a date. A short, bold dress, playful styling and bright makeup. Everything about her appearance told Joel she clearly wanted to please him. This turn of events somewhat embarrassed Joel, but he pretended not to notice Amanda's efforts. "Joel, did something serious happen?" the girl asked carefully, sitting down at the table. "You sounded so excited on the phone." "Yes," Joel began, coughing. "Amanda, tell me, have you noticed anything unusual in Cassie's behaviour lately?" Amanda only wrinkled her smooth forehead in response. "What do you mean?" she asked, confused. "You see," Joel hesitated, unsure how to approach the delicate subject. "Cassie has become too withdrawn. She almost doesn't talk to me, and I thought—" "What?" Amanda raised an eyebrow meaningfully. I thought she might have—" "Someone else?" A satisfied smile blossomed on Amanda's face. "So you think our Cassie has a lover or something?" Joel could have sworn he saw joy and triumph in his wife's best friend's eyes. "I'm not sure of that," he added quickly. "Maybe it's something else altogether, but she's stopped talking to me. I thought she might have told you about it. Cassie said you and she are like sisters, right?" Amanda nodded. "That's right. Cassie's like my own sister, even closer, but she never told me anything about this. She never even hinted that she might have someone else. She's always loved only you, Joel. You are everything to her." Joel noticed how Amanda modestly lowered her eyes and bit her lower lip. Her gestures seemed to say the opposite, as if she knew something she didn't dare tell Joel. She praised her friend as if trying to protect her, according to her bewildered husband. "Amanda," Joel looked trustingly into her eyes, "if you have something to tell me, I promise you, Cassie will know nothing. But I must know for sure if she really has another man. You don't have to make excuses for her, no matter how close you are. This is different."
Amanda raised her hypnotic dark eyes to him and then placed her palm dramatically on his hand. Joel, you're right. I should have told you everything much earlier. Amanda hesitated slightly, but then continued. Cassie behaves the same way with me. She doesn't say anything. But when we talk, it's as if she doesn't hear me. As if she's always on her own wavelength and doesn't notice I'm around. It's like she's lost. Amanda stopped, unsure if she should go on. And? Joel encouraged. What do you think about that? The girl looked at him and sighed. I think she's constantly in dreams about something or someone, but I can't say for sure, since Cassie hasn't told me anything specific either. Joel turned pale, as if hit in the gut. If Cassie had betrayed him, he would have to find out from her personally. Thank you, Amanda. You're a good friend, Joel said slowly. I understand it wasn't easy for you to voice your suspicions to me. What are you, Joel? The girl exclaimed and squeezed his hand. I'm just very anxious about Cassie. She is so sensitive, though she tries to seem strong all the time. Joel quickly said goodbye to Amanda and, releasing her hand, hurried out of the cafe. Getting into the car, he involuntarily thought about how strangely Amanda had behaved. She seemed to sincerely sympathize with him, but there was some strange sensuality in it that Joel couldn't explain. More precisely, he had long guessed what he liked, but had never shown it so openly and boldly. In any case, now is not the time to think about it. Joel pondered. I need to meet Cassie and finally find out from her what's going on between us. However, to Joel's great disappointment, his wife was not at home when he arrived. This seemed very strange to him. Usually at this time, Cassie was already waiting for him. He didn't know what to think. The man called his wife on her cell phone, but she didn't pick up. Going upstairs, Joel found a note in the bedroom. On a small piece of paper, Cassie wrote the following. Dear Joel, I really want you to understand me correctly. I have some unhappy times ahead of me, and before that, I want to be alone and be a part of nature. I'm going on a retreat to the mountains for a week. Please don't call me or try to find me. I'm purposely not telling you exactly where I'm going. I need to be alone. I have a lot to think about. Perhaps after that, I will come and tell you everything. For now, try to understand me and don't hold a grudge against me. I have always loved you and will always love you. Your Cassie. Joel felt bitter tears well up in his eyes. Crumpling the note, he tossed it forcefully into the trash can. He expected anything from his wife, but not this. How could you? He asked Cassie. How could you leave me and run away? Do I deserve to be treated like this? Fearing that Cassie had gone to the mountains with her new lover, Joel first tried to find out exactly where his spouse had gone. He searched through all the papers in his beloved study, but found nothing. Each passing minute filled Joel's heart with more despair and longing. What if she doesn't come back? What if she decides to stay with that other man forever? What should I do then? How can I live without her? Feeling more humiliated than ever, trampled by his emotions, Joel pulled a bottle of strong whiskey from his minibar. He spent the entire evening drinking glass after glass. His soul was crying out, torn apart by the thought of where Cassie was. The only woman he truly loved was at that moment. The next few days, Joel lived on edge. He kept trying to contact Cassie, but her phone was always unavailable. Finally, he got angry and gave up, deciding that if his wife wanted to contact him, she would do it herself. Joel did not want to be humiliated any longer and threw himself into his work. 3 days later, Joel was awakened in the middle of the night by an unexpected call. "Hello?" he said sleepily. "Who is it?" "Mr. Hillman?" a low male voice asked. "It's Sergeant Mendes speaking." "What? The police?" Joel instantly woke up and sat up in bed. "What's wrong?" It's about your wife, Cassie Hillman. Joel felt drops of cold sweat appear on his forehead. Where is she? She hasn't contacted me for almost a week. Can you tell me what's wrong with her? Is she okay? The silence on the other end made Joel jump out of bed and pace the room. Well, what is it? Don't be silent. Tell me what's wrong with my wife. We have reason to believe that Cassie Hillman is dead. What? Joel thought he'd misheard. What did you say? Calm down, Mr. Hillman. Your hysteria is useless right now, Mendes said calmly. The tourist centre where your wife was staying was hit by an avalanche yesterday morning. At this point, rescuers have found and saved almost all the members of the group except your wife. There are witnesses who saw that, shortly before the avalanche, your wife left the main building and went for a walk along the river. She was never seen again. Her body has not yet been found. However, we think she may have been swept into the mountain river. The current is very strong, so most likely the rescuers will not be able to find her remains for a long time. Remains? Joel asked in a choked voice. What remains? Do you realize what you're saying? It can't be. My wife is alive, do you understand? Cassie can't die. She can't. Mr. Hillman, you're in shock, I understand. It is difficult for you to come to terms with this tragedy. The police officer tried to comfort Joel. Let me send you the coordinates of the place where the avalanche occurred. You can come and see for yourself how the search is going. Our team is searching through the area. They will keep looking for your wife, don't doubt it. It seemed to Joel that the captain's words came from another reality. Everything that was happening felt like a terrible dream, a nightmare that would end the moment Cassie walked through the door and looked at Joel with her beautiful bright eyes. The experts have established that your wife went over there at the lowest point of the slope, Mendes explained. There is a river just below, not far from this place. Most of the snow from the avalanche has fallen into it. That's why we think she may have ended up in the water. No, Joel shook his head. I don't believe Cassie is gone. She is a fighter by nature. She wouldn't let herself die. Look for her. If you need money for extra expenses, just call me. I will transfer the full amount needed immediately. Mendes looked at the man as if he were insane, but did not argue. He himself was sure that Cassie Hillman had died almost instantly. But if this rich man wanted to prolong his hope of his wife's return, let him pay. The long days dragged on, with Joel constantly expecting a call from the rescuers or the police. He worked almost automatically, as all his thoughts were consumed by the question, was Cassie alive, or was he hoping in vain? Joel kept wondering why she went on that hike, and what she wanted to prove. Thoughts of a possible lover had long left him, because even if she had one, he was likely buried under the cold, indifferent snow. Weeks passed, with no news about Cassie. 4.5 months later, Cassie Hillman was formally declared dead. No amount of money helped Joel find even her remains. The funeral he arranged was purely symbolic, burying an empty urn, along with his last hope of seeing Cassie again. During and after the funeral, Amanda was constantly by Joel's side. She was very caring and attentive, trying to help Joel cope with his loss. Joel's heart was broken, and Amanda gradually became his most understanding and supportive companion. It took Joel a long time to recover. During this period, Amanda never once blamed Cassie for going on the hike, or for the alienation and coldness of the last days of life. To Amanda, Cassie was like a saint, and Joel deeply respected her desire to remember only the good about the deceased. As time passed, Joel realized that every day without her seemed less bright. Of course, at first he thought that he just got used to the girl. But then, having analysed the whole situation, he came to the conclusion that he should thank her for all the good that she had managed to do for him. Amanda, thank you for all you do, and helping me through this grief that has befallen me and you, Joel told her one day, sitting in his living room with her. "I don't know how I can ever thank you enough. Tell me what you want. I'll do anything for you. Cassie loved you, and now you're the closest thing I have to a friend." "Joel, Cassie is forever in my heart." "You're right, but grief has brought us closer together. You're the closest person to me right now, too, and I can finally admit that I've always loved you. I've loved you for so long that I thought I'd die an old maid. I couldn't look at anyone but you, I swear. Cassie would approve of our marriage, I'm sure." Joel looked at her in bewilderment, shock and surprise. "Do you really think so?" he asked cautiously. "I feel she would very much like it, that the two people closest to her remained together, saved each other in the boundless ocean of loneliness and heart emptiness." With these words, Amanda leaned to Joel and kissed him. Joel was so shocked that it was only after a few seconds that he was able to pull away from her. "Amanda, I'm sorry, I can't. I know you're right about a lot of things, but it's been too little time. And I don't love you. I love Cassie. It wouldn't be fair to you. You're a wonderful woman and you deserve a man who will really love you and who won't suffer for his dead wife." Amanda lowered her head as if she were upset and hurt, but in fact she was furious. And being a virtuoso at hiding her true feelings, in a second she looked up in Joel's eyes with devotion, meek and submissive. "Whatever you say, Joel, but let me keep coming to you, cooking for you, caring for you, doing what Cassie did. That way I'm dealing with the pain of loss too, and maybe that way you'll see me as something more than your wife's friend." Life went on. Amanda no longer let herself make advances on Joel. As for him, he was glad she calmed down and accepted his decision. He also gave her the keys to his house, and now Amanda came over and cooked dinner for the two of them. He also gave her the keys to his house, and now Amanda would come over on Fridays in the middle of the day and cook dinner for the two of them. It was their time where they shared news, reminisced about Cassie, and generally supported each other. And then one day, Joel saw Amanda's anger for the first time. It was Friday when Amanda was cooking dinner for them together. After coming home from work, Joel dropped his things in the hallway, shouted to Amanda that he'd be there soon, and went upstairs to change. But when he came downstairs, he saw Amanda in the hallway. She didn't see him, absorbed in her own thoughts, but in the mirror he could see her face twisted with an angry expression, and her fists clenched. "What's wrong?" Joel asked excitedly. "Oh, nothing," Amanda replied with a gentle smile. "Nothing special. Just an unpleasant call from the past." Joel did not pay much attention to her words, but noted that Amanda was slightly nervous for the rest of the evening. A month later, Joel hurried in his car to the office for a business meeting. Suddenly he saw an elderly gypsy woman. It was a red light for her, but she was obviously deep in thought and mistakenly took a fatal step from the sidewalk onto the road. Joel needed all his driving skills to brake in time and avoid harming her. The car stopped just a few centimetres from her feet. "Are you all right?" exclaimed Joel, rushing to the gypsy woman to see if she was hurt. She looked intently into his eyes and then suddenly said, "May I have a look at your hand? You are a very interesting man. You saved my life." Joel was so amazed at the elderly woman's composure that he held out his palm to her without speaking. The fortune-teller studied the lines on his hand long and carefully, then took Joel by the chin and looked intently into his brown eyes. "What's the matter with wife?" she asked quietly. "I can see you miss her a lot. She is far away now, it is true, but she loves you and misses you very much, though she is quite offended at you." Joel's brain felt as if pierced by a red-hot arrow. Did this striking woman really mean? Unable to contain his feelings, Joel grabbed the gypsy woman by the shoulders and shook her violently, shouting one question. "Cassie, is she alive? Tell me, have you seen her?" The fortune-teller only smiled thoughtfully and patted Joel's shoulders motherly. "I told you everything I see. Thank you again for sparing my life. The spirits will help you, if you can find a second one like me." With these words, the elderly woman smoothly pulled away from Joel and leisurely headed down the street. "Hey, wait! Hey!" Joel tried to catch up with her, but the gypsy woman did not turn around, as if she hadn't heard him. Joel got distracted for a moment to check his car, and when he turned back, she had disappeared altogether, as if she had never been there. "It's mystical," was all Joe could mutter. Looking at his hands, he saw that they were shaking with a fine tremor. It wasn't surprising, considering the emotions raging in his soul at that moment. He couldn't believe his own happiness. Cassie was alive! "What if you, the fortune teller, are lying?" he reasoned with himself on the way home from work. "What if she's just a fraud? I heard the gypsies have powerful hypnotism. Maybe that's it." However, after thinking about it, Joel abandoned such a thought. "No way, it's nothing. If she wanted to rob me, she would have done it immediately. And she didn't take anything. She didn't even ask for money. And she knew from somewhere that I had a second wife." Thinking about all this, Joel used all his connections and very soon was able to get to the best detective in the capital, Hayes Rannells. The private detective had a truly clear reputation, and many of Joel's acquaintances praised him not only for his professional skills, but also for personal qualities like honesty, integrity, and complete confidentiality. Having arranged a meeting, Joel told the detective the story of his wife's disappearance and asked him to find any references to women with a similar appearance to Cassie who had appeared at the mountain area recently. "Maybe she lost her memory or something like that," Joel explained to the detective. "I don't know what exactly happened to her, but I'm sure Cassie just can't contact me, for whatever reason." "Understood, Mr. Hillman." Rannells nodded. "I'll dig my nose into the ground and find your wife." Joel exhaled tiredly. "I beg you check every leaf, every branch in these woods. The police are just trying to close the case. If a person is missing, they're gone." The detective looked at the man with a sly smile. "Don't worry, Mr. Hillman, that's the police, and I'm a private investigator. We have other methods, and hopefully they will prove much more effective." After this conversation, the detective gathered his things and flew straight to the mountains. Hayes had to put in significant effort and travel to many local villages until he finally got lucky. "I've seen such a maiden," muttered a huntsman, looking at Cassie's photograph that the detective was showing her. "She's Alberta's assistant. Alberta is our herbalist." "Are you sure?" the detective asked with hope in his voice. "Absolutely," the huntsman answered and pointed toward the forest. "Alberta lives in the middle of nowhere, beneath the mountain. If you find her hut, you'll find yours, the missing one." Hayes thanked the woman and, without wasting time, set off to find the herbalist's house. He walked through the dense forest until dusk, and it got dark quickly there. Hayes Rannells checked the map frequently to ensure he was heading in the right direction. At one point, while shining his flashlight on the map, his leg was suddenly pierced by excruciating pain. Shrieking loudly, the detective fell onto the grass and saw that his foot had fallen into a huge trap, the kind usually set for bears or other large predators. My God, was all the man could mutter before he plunged into darkness, dropping the flashlight and the map, which had the final destination circled in bold red paste, the cabin of the herbalist. When the detective regained consciousness, he didn't immediately realize where he was. Everything around him was adorned with strange objects, dried herbs, and bright, multicolored beads hanging everywhere. "Where am I?" Hayes slowly uttered, his lips still numb, making him sound like a wooden puppet. "It's all right, you're safe now," a beautiful female voice said nearby. "You were trapped, so you'll have to stay here for a while until your leg heals." The detective looked up carefully and saw two women sitting next to him, at a small round table. One was older, with long black braids hanging down either side of her beautiful, elongated fox-like face. The other was younger, blonde, very thin, with attentive light grey eyes. "Cassie!" involuntarily burst out Hayes. "How good it is that I have found you!" "Have we met?" The woman was surprised and looked at the man incomprehensibly. Alberta only frowned in response and spoke softly. "We live in interesting times. Earlier, husbands would follow their wives even to the end of the world for great love, to fight any demons to protect them. And now, they send strangers in their place to do all the dirty work for them?" Cassie slowly shifted her gaze from Alberta to the man and back again. "So, were you sent here by Joel?" She was sincerely amazed. "Well, here's one for you. Did he remember me after all this time? Or is he unhappy with his new wife?" Hayes leaned back on his pillows. He was still weak. "Rest." Alberta spoke and brought a mug with some herbal infusion to his lips. "Drink. Drink so the wounds heal faster. I don't need any freeloaders here." As soon as Hayes' lips touched the bitter drink, he felt incredibly tired. He had a terrible desire to sleep. But before he passed out, he managed to say to Cassie, "I promised to let him know when I found you. Joel, he loves you very much." The next time Hayes came to his senses, it was already daytime outside. He determined this by the bright light streaming into the windows of the hut through the clean panes. "How are you feeling?" Cassie asked as she came up to him. "Strangely enough, but already better." Hayes answered honestly. He wasn't lying. The pain in his leg had indeed subsided, although he felt he would have to recover for quite a long time. "Cassie, tell me, how did you find me?" the detective inquired. The woman only smiled softly, pointing with her hand somewhere deep inside the hut. "It was all Alberta. She sensed there was someone in the woods who needed help. We went out, wandered around the forest for a while. Alberta had to make a connection with the spirits, as she calls it, and then we saw the light from your flashlight and found you. It turns out that the two of you dragged me home alone?" the detective asked, genuinely surprised. "Well, yes, we took a stretcher with us. Alberta said it would be helpful." "She is really like a shaman. How could she know I was lying there?" Cassie looked out the window, and sadness was reflected on her face. "Yes, Alberta is a wonderful person. She saved me when I thought I was already dead." "What do you mean?" The detective didn't understand. "You were caught in an avalanche, weren't you?" The woman raised her eyebrows skeptically. "You know about that too? Well, it's really true. I went to the river to think about what to do next. You see, I was very ill. You might say I was preparing for death. And I was also terrified to tell my husband about it." Hayes looked at Cassie in amazement. "Joel thought you had another man and ran away with him." "Really?" Cassie turned away, but the detective had time to see her eyes sparkling with tears. "Well, it doesn't matter anymore. When Alberta found me, I was between this world and the afterlife." It took all of Cassie's self-control to hold back her bursting feelings. "My breathless body washed ashore. I was lying in shallow water, and Alberta rescued me and brought me here. She managed to do what the doctors couldn't. She healed me. I was treated for a very long time with herbs and spiritual practices that she taught me. The doctor said I could have died in 6 months to a year, but as you can see, I'm still alive. Don't think I'm naive enough not to have my tests rechecked. I was in a neighbouring city. They have an MRI machine there. There's no more tumour. Do you understand?" The doctor looked at me like a fool and said, "Why did you even have a checkup? You're perfectly healthy." "Wait, but if that's so, then why did you not let Joel know about yourself all this time?" Cassie looked at him, and her eyes sparkled with righteous anger. "You don't think I've tried? I called my husband, but I heard Amanda's voice instead.
Do you know what she told me? That Joel had buried me, mourned me, and was ready to move on. That he didn't need me anymore, and he's marrying Amanda. She told me never to call him or her again. Told me to feel sorry for Joel if I loved him, and really, wishing him nothing but happiness. Cassie wiped her eyes and added briefly, I'm not going back to him. Let them be happy. Hayes looked at Cassie and shook his head. I think you're very wrong about your husband. And do you realise that I have to let him know you're here anyway? That's my job. And you'll figure out what to do with your husband and with your life. The woman only shrugged her shoulders in response. I don't care now. When Hayes reported everything to Joel by satellite phone, he first fell into complete prostration, and then ordered tickets and flew to the detective and his wife the next morning. With difficulty getting to the herbalist's hut, the man almost lost the gift of speech when he saw Cassie in the yard. Finally, you have found your sweetheart, have you? Sternly looking at him, Alberta asked. Know that she is Phoenix, risen from the ashes. She's got a great will to live, not like you. You mourned her for a little and gave up. Joel was so happy that he did not pay attention to the herbalist's bark and only said joyfully, The fortune-teller was right. I found a second one like her. It's you, and through you I found Cassie. However, Cassie was not in the mood to forgive her husband. Joel had to ask for forgiveness from his ex-wife for a very long time before she finally thawed a little and told him the same story as the detective. So that's why Amanda was so nervous on that damn Friday, Joel finally realised. You called her, and she was afraid you might come back. There's no way she expected you to be alive. But that didn't stop you from being nice to her, Cassie said coldly. How could you, Joel? It's Amanda. You saw that she was always partial to you, literally obsessed with you. If I had known then where this was going, Joel muttered back to her, Cassie, I'm so sorry to you. Forgive me for God's sake. If I had been more careful and sensitive, none of this would have happened to you. Joel dropped to his knees in front of his wife and began to cover her hands with kisses. Don't, Joel, get up, Cassie begged him. I can see that you're remorseful, and that's good enough for me. After all, I never stopped loving you, either, not for a single day, even though your betrayal with Amanda hurt me. Cassie took a deep breath and continued. But if it wasn't for the whole story, I wouldn't be standing here right now. So in a way, this trip was my salvation. Joel hugged his wife affectionately and pulled her to him as gently as he could. Into that embrace he put all of his unspent love that he had kept deep in his heart all this time. Cassie, how blind I've been, how stupid. Go back to me, please. I love you, and never stopped loving. Cassie smiled at her husband and slowly replied, Okay, let's try, but first we need to get Hayes to the hospital. After all, he did so much to find me, and as it turns out, risked his health to do it. Hayes was transported to a good clinic, and Joel paid for his treatment, and also paid the man a solid fee for finding his beloved wife. Cassie did not forget Alberta. In gratitude for her rescue, she hired a team of builders, and they built her a modern, spacious home. Additionally, they constructed a separate annex for all the necessary attributes for the herbalist. When Cassie and Joel arrived home, Amanda was in a natural rage. She lashed out and expressed to her sworn friend all the resentment that had accumulated in her soul over the years. As it turned out, Amanda had always envied Cassie. During their studies and afterward, when Cassie got a good job, Amanda couldn't handle it. When Joel appeared in Cassie's life, Amanda set herself the goal of taking away Cassie's most precious thing, her husband. And when Cassie supposedly died in an avalanche, Amanda was terribly happy about it. Joel was shocked and told her
to never show up in his and Cassie's life. A few months later, Cassie pleased her spouse with the news of her pregnancy. Now, the couple is preparing for the birth of the baby and hopes that their life will be filled only with happiness from now on.